Hey guys, so Josh here with Flashover Welding. I had a guy helping me the other day. He actually had a really good question. I kind of went into way more detail than I should have, and I'm probably about to do the same thing. But he asked me, when I weld seams on steel, do I weld the whole thing, or what else would I do? And you kind of, in order to make an educated decision on which one that you should do, whether you do a seam weld or you do what I call stitch welding, you have to take a few things into account. Probably the biggest thing is the metal thickness. The thinner the gauge or the thinner the thickness of the metal, the more problems you're going to have. So, and the reason those problems arise is because of what's called metal memory. So metal memory is, so there's hot roll and then there's cold roll. So cold roll tends to be a little bit stronger. It's not heated up multiple times. It's heated up once. It's laid out at the forger. They cut it to length and then it's set to cool. Anyways, that's the best. That's the strongest type of metal to get if you're comparing hot roll and cold roll. Cold roll, very expensive though, because it is a little bit stronger, but they also can't transport it efficiently, so they end up transporting it kind of piece by piece. So to get the materials, actually, it's pretty expensive. So what everybody else uses, really, unless they're doing some work in a machine shop or whatever and using cold roll, they use hot roll. Hot roll, it's rolled up, so you'll have these huge sheets of steel, but they're like 300 feet long, and they roll them up when they're red hot, and then they package them, put them on an 18-wheeler, get them closer to where they're actually going to be distributed, heat them up again, roll it out, cut it, and then send it out for distribution. So the downside of heating up a steel over and over again is it gets weaker. So this is where you're going to kind of run into the problem with mild steel. The carbon rating is lower, but also with hot roll, it's heated up multiple times. So when it comes to metal memory, remember that it was originally formed in a coil. So it's, when you heat this metal back up, it's going to try to take its original form, which is in a coil. So you'll start to heat it up and you'll start to weld it out, and all of a sudden it'll start to warp and it'll start to crinkle in one direction. That's because it's trying to take its original form, which was coil. Cold roll, you don't have near that amount of problems with it. Whatever warping you have is generally a bracing issue. So that's the other part of it, is when you do large weld outs like this, you need bracing because it'll keep it from pulling. That's one way that you can avoid the warping issue. The other thing that I do on thin steel is I do stitch welding. So I'm going to give you an example of stitch welding, and then I'm going to show you a part that I'm going to end up probably having a seam weld just because of the use of what I'm building. So I'm building, they're really big planters, and I'm building quite a few of them. But I'm building it out of 11 gauge, or in the United States, I'm building it out of 1/8 inch. So that's a pretty thin steel, so I can't weld it out completely. Otherwise, I'm going to run into all kinds of problems, and it's going to look like hell when I'm done. The welds will look great, but the rest of it look like shit. So, anyways, this is how to avoid it. All right, so here is where I'm probably going to end up doing a seam weld. So this is tacked every so often. This is a corner weld. Butt welds are not strong really whatsoever. So anyways, this is a corner weld. So this corner right here will have, that weld can fill that void, and then it's a little bit stronger than a butt weld. All right, so this is stitch welding. So stitch welding, I did stitch welds probably 2 inches long every 8 to 10 inches on this steel. And that's, that to me, that's pretty much what I do on everything. The heavier the steel, the closer they're going to be, though. So I haven't done this side yet, so all of this is just kind of tacked into position. So anyways, I tacked it. This is supported by angle iron, so I did my first weld. I connected this to the angle iron that's supporting this whole thing, and then I connected this sheet of steel to this sheet of steel. So anyways, I hope that gives you a little bit of explanation, or on hot roll versus cold roll, seam welds versus butt welds versus corner welds, and stitch welding. So anyways, hope you learned something.